100 BC. A son is born to the gens Julia, one of the most ancient patrician families in the Eternal City. His mother's family were of consular rank. His father, a noted questor, praetor, military tribune, and proconsul of Asia. Given his family's position, the newborn child is expected by his parents to enjoy a fruitful career in politics, religion, or Rome's armed forces, much in the same vein as his father. Any such course would be apt for one born to the Julian line, but this child held destiny in his hands, and only time would reveal the true greatness born that day. A man who will make the family name of the Julii legendary for millennia to come, and become one of the most intelligent and cunning politicians in Roman history, and arguably the most celebrated military commander and general of all time, Gaius Julius Caesar. The man known to history as Gaius Julius Caesar was born on either the 12th or the 13th of July, 100 BC, in the Italian capital of Rome, during the era of the Roman Republic. His father, Gaius Julius Caesar III, was an important figure in Rome and acted in various posts, including praetor or magistrate, questor or public official, colony commissioner, and proconsul of Asia. He had been on the losing side of the First Roman Civil War during the 80s BC, supporting his brother-in-law and consul to the Republic on 7 occasions, Gaius Marius. Caesar's mother was Aurelia Cotta, and her family were prominent figures in the Roman aristocracy, as both her father and grandfather served as magistrates during the Republican era, and were of consular rank, the highest elected political office within Rome's stratified society. Caesar's parents, Aurelia and Gaius Julius Caesar III, had 2 daughters, Julia Major and Julia Minor, but Gaius Julius was their only son, being born in 100 BC or as early as 102 BC, according to different sources. However, little is known about Caesar's early life, and indeed, the debate surrounding his birth date suggests he may not have been expected to be an important figure within Roman society. His family were descended from the original Roman aristocracy and were of the patrician class, originating from the powerful Julian family, or gens Julii, who were one of the major Alban houses to settle in Rome during the mid-7th century BC. And Caesar himself proudly traced his lineage through Greco-Roman mythology to the Trojan prince Aeneas, whose mother was the goddess Aphrodite, otherwise known as Venus, the ancestress of the founders of Rome itself, Romulus and Remus. The cognomen, or third name of Gaius Julius, used to identify a particular branch of a family, was Caesar, and according to Pliny the Elder, the name originated from the means of giving birth by cutting the abdomen, the Latin caedere, or to cut. But the Historia Augusta suggests 3 other origins, which were that Caesar had thick hair, Latin caesaris, or that he had bright grey eyes, Latin oculus caesais, or that he killed an elephant, Moorish caesai. And it is this interpretation that Caesar favoured, judging by the images of elephants he used in coinage. Suetonius described Caesar as tall of stature with a fair complexion, shapely limbs, a somewhat full face and keen black eyes, and in terms of his health, he is thought to have suffered from a kind of epilepsy, apparently caused by a tapeworm infecting his brain. Others suggest he might have suffered from malaria, whilst other modern medical historians have suggested his seizures may have been caused by either cardiovascular disease, due to his father and grandfather's sudden demises, or hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar, or even temporal lobe epilepsy, due to his inattention to his own safety, in the run-up to his eventual assassination. Caesar's first marriage was to Cassutia, a plebeian from the Cassuti people who held the Roman rank of equestrian, although Caesar is thought to have left Cassutia to marry Cornelia Cinna, or Cornelia Minor, daughter of the influential and powerful politician Lucius Cornelius Cinna, shortly after his father's death in 84 BC, when he was nominated to the position of Flamen Dialis, a high priest of Jupiter, as the position required that the holder should not touch metal, ride a horse, or see a corpse, and that the holder be married to a patrician, which Cornelia was, and it was with her that Caesar had the only child he would recognize as legitimate, a daughter, Julia. It was at the age of 16, on his father's death, that Julius Caesar found himself the head of the Julius household, at a time when there was civil war between his aunt Julia's husband Gaius Marius, aided by his ally and Caesar's father-in-law, Lucius Cornelius Cinna, and their enemy, the famed military general and consul, Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Caesar's uncle, Gaius Marius, is perhaps most famous today for his important militaristic reforms, including the creation of a standing army divided into separate legions who carried their own supplies. He also introduced the enlisting of the poor, rather than just the landed elite, and provided retirement benefits for veterans, all changes which would have great social and political consequences. For example, granting of lands to retired soldiers was crucial in securing conquered provinces, and in their ultimate Romanization. The reforms Marius introduced would drive the expansion of the Roman Empire for years to come, but there would also be some negative consequences of his reforms, as the soldiers who were paid by their generals owed allegiance more to their commander than to the state. This would introduce instability to Rome, and ultimately result in the bloody civil wars that marked this period of Roman history. As well as this, Marius held the office of consul in Rome for an unprecedented 7 times, and also had populares leanings, who were a party which favoured the plebs, or ordinary people, and he would lead them against Sulla's optimates, who promoted the supremacy of the Senate and the aristocracy. Indeed, it could be said that Marius's populares political views greatly influenced Caesar, as, like his uncle, he would famously become a champion of the plebs, and would ultimately lead his armies against the Senate and the aristocracy, which in many ways was a replay of the war between Marius and Sulla. The Marius-Sulla civil war had started around 88 BC, and at the time Caesar married Cornelia, Marius was in control of Rome. But following a dispute between Sulla and Marius over command of the forces during the war in northern Anatolia, Sulla marched on Rome with 5 of his best legions, and in a battle between the two, Marius was defeated, declared an enemy of the state, and fled the city, heading to Africa. By the end of 87 BC, aided by Lucius Cornelius Cinna, Marius returned to Rome and took control once again, declaring the reforms put in place by Sulla as null and void, exiling him, and officially installing himself and Cinna as consuls for 86 BC, reinstating the populares politically. However, Marius died only 2 weeks later, and Cinna was left in sole command of Rome. After this, a resurgent Sulla returned to Rome once again, defeated the populares at the Battle of the Colline Gate in November of 82 BC, following which Caesar was named in the proscriptions of 82 BC, which publicly condemned him and many others to death, including senators and important individuals, with a reward for any person who killed them. This declaration resulted in mass killings, and at the end of Sulla's time in office, when he relinquished his dictatorship in 81 BC, Rome was in turmoil, and shortly after, Sulla stood instead as consul, which he gained in 80 BC for the second time, but he soon retired from office and died shortly after. Following Sulla's victory in the civil war of 82 BC, Caesar had been stripped of his priesthood and his wife's dowry, as well as his inheritance, due to his family connections with Cinna. But he refused Sulla's request for him to divorce Cornelia, and instead went into hiding to avoid retribution, and, no longer a high priest, he was free to follow a military career, so he joined the army and served in Asia and Cilicia. Whilst there, he received the civic crown honours for leading a private army into battle at the siege of Mytilene, saving a man's life in the process. On the island of Lesbos, he also spent time in Bithynia to secure the help of King Nicomedes and his fleet. However, the long time he spent there led to rumours of an affair between Caesar and the king, which Caesar denied. Whilst in hiding from Sulla, Caesar had displayed his militaristic passion and skill, and once he learned of Sulla's death in the spring of 78 BC, Caesar returned to Rome, acquiring a small house in Subura, a lower-class area of Rome, becoming a prosecuting advocate, or lawyer, in 77 BC, and distinguished himself in the court system for his adversarial and unconventional analyses of cases, delivered with a shrill-toned oratory and passionate gestures, which he did for 2 years whilst preparing himself for a political career. In 76 BC, Caesar's daughter Julia was born, a famous beauty She would later help her father by marrying Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, or Pompey the Great, in 59 BC, to help secure Caesar's political allegiances and secure the formation of the First Triumvirate, a three-way political alliance between Pompey, Caesar, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, who was known for his fabulous wealth, which lasted from 60 BC to 53 BC, but ended on the death of Crassus in 53 BC whilst on an expedition against the Parthians. During Caesar's formative years, he was kidnapped in 75 BC, at 20 years old, when pirates boarded a vessel he was on whilst travelling to the Roman province of Rhodes to further his education under the ancient Greek teacher Apollonius of Tyana, a Neo-Pythagorean philosopher. During the ordeal, he was kidnapped for up to 40 days and maintained an air of superiority throughout, with the pirates demanding a ransom for Caesar's return, which was increased upon his own demand, as he believed a Roman such as himself was worth much more than the 20 talents of silver they were asking for. This resulted in the pirates being paid 50 talents of silver instead of 20, but in true Caesar fashion, he tracked the pirates down a month later and had them executed on the cross, allowing them the leniency of having their throats cut first. Following his kidnapping ordeal, Caesar served in the military to the east from 74 BC to 72 BC. During the Third Mithridatic War, which was part of a series of territorial conflicts between the Roman Republic and the King of Pontus, or Armenia Minor, in northern Anatolia, and while serving there, he captured the attention of senior officials for his privately led quest against Mithridates VI, and the beginning of his service in the region. The first step on Caesar's political career was when he was elected military tribune on his return to Rome in 72 BC, a military leadership position in charge of the legions, typically given to members of the ruling elite on their path to the Senate, following which in 69 BC he began an alliance with Pompey the Great, and was elected quaestor, or public official, for that year, giving the oration at his aunt Julia's funeral. But it was also during that year that his wife Cornelia died, early in her husband's quaestorship, following approximately 13 years of marriage. After this, he spent the next 2 years serving his quaestorship in Hispania, which was a junior classification of magistrate in charge of finance, returning in 67 BC to marry Pompeia, a granddaughter of Sulla, after which in 65 BC he was elected curule aedile, which was an office given to a former magistrate, empowering them to issue edicts. In this post, he was responsible for maintenance of public buildings and arrangements surrounding public festivals. Whilst in office, Caesar staged games, with money loaned from his political and financial patron Crassus, which gained him popularity and support, although he was also accused by his contemporaries of accepting bribes and promoting certain people in order to secure his rise within the social circles of Rome. In 63 BC, Cato the Younger was elected as tribune of the plebs for 62 BC, an office which acted as a check on magistrates and the Senate, and was thus a protection for the plebs, or common people, whilst Marcus Tullius Cicero was appointed senior consul in this year, and would deal with the major issue of the Second Catilinarian Conspiracy, over which Caesar would come to oppose Cato in the Senate over the pronouncement of the death penalty for the conspirators, as Cato wanted them killed, but Caesar advocated leniency. A patrician noble, Lucius Sergius Catilina, had been accused of raising an army in rebellion against Rome after failing to be elected consul, and conspiring to kill the consuls and magistrates in office, including Cicero himself. And so in response, Cicero proposed to execute the conspirators without trial, which would have been an unconstitutional act, but Caesar, whilst agreeing on their guilt, suggested they instead be sent to the Italian provinces. Marcus Porcius Cato Udicensis, or Cato the Younger, as he was known, argued that their execution was a necessary deterrent for others considering treason, as to wait for the proof of their crimes, the actual overthrow of the state, would mean the rebellion could not be quashed. This argument prompted the Senate to approve Cicero's request, and the rebel leaders were executed, whilst their leader, Catilina, who was with their forces between Rome and Gaul, met Antonius Hybrida's forces in battle at Pistoia, with much beleaguered numbers, and was killed. The differences between Cato and Caesar started at this time, as Cato was said to have criticized Caesar for reading a personal message at the Senate, whilst the important business of the Catilinarian conspiracy was being discussed, even accusing his political adversary of involvement in the plot. This prompted Caesar to pass Cato the note, which was, in fact, a love letter sent by Cato's half-sister Servilia, who was Caesar's mistress at the time. Shortly after, in 63 BC, Caesar ran for election to the highest position within the Roman Church, known as a pontiff. With the official title of Pontifex Maximus, chief priest of the Roman state religion, he ran against consuls Quintus Lutatius Catulus and Publius Servilius Vatia Isuricus, and despite his opponent's greater experience, he won by a comfortable margin, resulting in accusations of bribery from all sides, succeeding Quintus Caecilius Metellus Pius, who had been installed by the previous ruler Sulla. It is thought that Caesar's marriage to Sulla's granddaughter Pompeia was also a marriage of political convenience, allowing Caesar to gain influence by promoting people from within Sulla's entourage, such as Crassus, in return for political support. As well as this, Caesar's position as Pontifex Maximus came with a residence on the Via Sacra, and in 62 BC, Pompeia hosted the festival of the Bona Dea, or Good Goddess, there, which only women could attend. However, a young patrician named Publius Clodius Pulcher was discovered at the ceremony, dressed as a woman, with the apparent intention of seducing Pompeia. Publius Claudius Pulcher was later sent to trial for sacrilege, with Caesar refusing to testify against him, as he thought he could gain political advantage by staying on side with the popular politician, and Claudius was acquitted, with the help of Crassus, whose bribes bought the outcome of the trial. But the Bona Dea scandal would be the nail in the coffin for his marriage to Pompeia, and they divorced in 61 BC, as Caesar felt that his wife, although probably innocent, should nonetheless be someone who is above reproach. The year before his divorce, Caesar had been elevated to praetor in 62 BC, which was the second highest rank of a Roman magistrate, and he was made the governor or pro-praetor of Spain the following year, which included parts of the region of Portugal, but before leaving, he would need to settle his debts. Caesar did this with the help of his financier, Marcus Licinius Crassus, who paid some debts and stood as guarantor for others in return for Caesar's support in opposing Pompey, and whilst governor of Spain, Caesar conquered local tribes, acquiring great wealth in the process, and was thus able to repay the rest of his debts. He was also declared as Imperator by his troops in 60 BC, an honorary title assumed by great military commanders. The gaining of the title Imperator allowed Caesar to request a triumph from the Senate, which was a ceremony of victory. However, for this to happen, Caesar would have to remain a soldier until the ceremony was held, but Caesar had his eyes on the political post of consul, the most senior rank of magistrate in Rome, and to stand for this position, he would have to enter Rome as a citizen, and therefore forego the triumph he had earned, as it was forbidden for a Roman leader to enter the territory of Rome at the head of an army. Although Caesar made a request to the Senate that the triumph be held in his absence, this was prevented by Cato, as he filibustered the Senate, or talked long into the night, to prevent Caesar's request being heard. Thus Caesar had to choose, and he chose the consulship, and so Caesar stood and won the consulship for 59 BC, along with the conservative Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus, who was married to Cato's daughter Portia. But the election was, by all accounts, marked by bribery, as even Cato, known for his upright approach, was said to have condoned bribery if it prevented Caesar winning. The two consuls had worked alongside each other before, as both were curule aedile in 65 BC and both praetor in 62 BC, but they disliked each other, and Suetonius records that the Senate decided to give Caesar control over mere woods and pastures after his time in office, rather than the usual important strategic areas of command, a measure aimed to limit Caesar's political power. Caesar, angry at this decision of the Senate, decided to win over Pompey, who was himself aggrieved that the Senate had failed to ratify the settlements he had gained in the Third Mithridatic War. He also enlisted the support of Crassus, as although Crassus and Pompey had been rivals for some time prior to the alliance being formed, they were both politically powerful, and so Caesar managed to pacify the tempestuous relationship between them and created a political alliance between the three men. This pact became known as the First Triumvirate, or Rule of Three Men, and although accounts of the events of this time differ between chroniclers as to whether it occurred in 60 BC before the consular election, or in 59 BC after it, what is known is that Pompey married Caesar's daughter Julia in 59 BC, to strengthen this diplomatic relationship. And furthermore, although Caesar had invited the high-ranking politician and philosopher Marcus Tullius Cicero to join them, he had declined the offer on the grounds that the alliance might undermine the Republic. One of Caesar's first acts as consul was to ensure his own governorship of Cisalpine Gaul and Illyria for a period of 5 years, thus enabling him to begin his conquest of Gaul. And when in 56 BC the agreement between the three men was renewed at the Lucca Conference, Caesar retained his governorships for another 5 years and added Transalpine Gaul to the list, giving him command of 4 legions, whilst Pompey was given Hispania and Crassus was given control of Syria. Caesar's rise to political prominence at this time marks his greatest achievement to date, and some of the measures passed during Caesar's consulship of 59 BC included the order to make records of political dialogue within the Senate, and the introduction of the Agrarian Bill, financed by Pompey's proceeds of war, but opposed by Cato, which saw land reforms in Campania, assigning land to the poor citizens of Rome with more than 3 children, strengthening the support for populist leadership in the Republic. The bill, supported by Pompey and Crassus, was delayed by Cato the Younger and the other Optimates senators, as although Caesar made it fair and balanced to appease the Optimates, they feared it would bring Caesar great popularity and support, and as well as this, giving land to the poor was against their conservative, pro-aristocratic beliefs. Bibulus, the other consul for 59 BC, opposed the vote, saying he wanted no new innovations in his year of office, and he helped in the delaying tactics of the Senate. But, running out of ideas, he finally declared a sacred period for the rest of the year, meaning that no business could take place. Frustrated with this, Caesar lost patience with his opposition, and whilst Cato was making a speech against Caesar at the Rostra, the large platform outside the Senate, which orators used for their speeches, Caesar's lictors, or bodyguards to the magistrates, arrested Cato, but Caesar later relented and decided to put the issue to the plebeian council, and let the people decide, which he did with subsequent motions also, and did not convene the Senate for the rest of his consulship. On the day the vote was due, both Cato and Bibulus tried to rouse public opinion against Caesar. However, Caesar ignored this and continued with the vote. Bibulus and 2 of his tribunes objected and denounced the bill on the steps of the temple of Castor and Pollux, but the people turned on him, covering him in feces. He urged the crowd to kill him to end his embarrassment, but then his fellow senators helped him leave, and subsequently the bill was passed. The following day, Bibulus attended the Senate and requested that the bill be repealed, but this was refused, and he resisted, swearing an oath to uphold it, but finally relented, and after his humiliating defeat, he retreated to his home, occasionally issuing complaints and making proclamations of bad omens aimed at undermining and possibly repealing any laws passed by Caesar. But his actions resulted in attacks on his house by supporters of Caesar and Pompey. After this, the matter degraded still further into the slinging of insults, as supporters of Caesar and the First Triumvirate called the 2 consuls for 59 BC Julius and Caesar, mocking Bibulus's lack of power, and Bibulus retaliated by calling Caesar Queen of Bithynia, in reference to the rumour of an affair Caesar was said to have had with the king of Bithynia. He also accused Caesar of involvement in the Catilinarian conspiracy. Roman society saw submission or passivity during sex as an indication of inferiority, regardless of gender, and so the raising of questions of homosexuality may have been a way for Caesar's adversaries to slander or humiliate him, especially as those who wrote of it, including Cicero and Bibulus, who were indeed his enemies. Furthermore, the accusations were denied by Caesar, and the demeaning of political opponents in this way was common in Roman circles. It was at this time that the Vettius incident occurred, when a plebeian named Vettius ran into the forum, armed with a knife, and tried to stab Caesar and Pompey. After being arrested, he admitted he had been sent by Cicero, Cato, and Bibulus, and had been given the dagger by one of the latter's bodyguards. After being imprisoned overnight, Vettius was found dead in the cells the next morning, and Caesar claimed he had been killed by the Optimates so that he would not expose their plot. However, Cassius Dio suggests that the whole matter may have been invented by Caesar to discredit the Optimates. Cato continued his opposition of the Triumvirate and attempted to prevent Caesar becoming governor of Illyria and Cisalpine Gaul, as well as opposing the appointment of Crassus to Syria, but he failed, and at the end of his consulship for 59 BC, Caesar left for his provinces, escaping any comeback for possible irregularities whilst in office due to the immunity from prosecution that came with his governorship post for the next 5 years. Also, during the time of his consulship, Caesar had married again in late 59 BC, this time to the 17-year-old Calpurnia Pisonis, the daughter of the powerful senator Lucius Calpurnius Piso Saturninus, who would later become consul in 58 BC. Calpurnia was younger than Julia, her stepdaughter, at the time of her marriage to Caesar. A shy, humble woman, she would turn a blind eye to her husband's many infidelities, remaining a faithful and virtuous wife for the whole of their marriage. Caesar was said to have seduced the wives of many prominent men, including both of his allies in the First Triumvirate, and his affairs were said to include Cato's half-sister Servilia, the Mauritanian queen Juno, as well as, most famously, the Queen of Egypt, Cleopatra, whom he is said to have fathered a son with, known as Ptolemy XV or Caesarion. It has also been suggested that Servilia's son and one of Caesar's eventual assassins, Marcus Junius Brutus, may have been fathered by Caesar, although this is debatable, and it is also claimed that Servilia tried to tempt Caesar with the favours of her daughter, Junia Tertia, who was also rumoured to be fathered by Caesar. However, there were to be no children for Calpurnia from her marriage to Caesar, and his ever-faithful wife never remarried after he died. In contrast, the marriage between Pompey and Caesar's daughter Julia was very successful, as she was reputedly very beautiful and virtuous, and he was completely captivated by his young bride, so much so that he opted to remain in Rome to oversee the grain stores instead of travelling to Hispania, his allocated province. Indeed, it could be said that in allowing his beautiful daughter to marry Pompey, Caesar effectively nullified one of his strongest potential rivals, instead turning him into one of his strongest allies, at least for the time being. When Caesar left for the provinces at the end of 59 BC, the Triumvirate was still able to exert its influence through Publius Claudius Pulcher, who had been elected one of the 10 tribunes for the plebs for 58 BC, and he worked to make sure their wishes were complied with. In order to do this, the men felt that Cato's absence would be a great benefit, and so they sent Cato to annex Cyprus, appointing him to the office of Quaestor pro praetore, a post he initially refused, but when Claudius conferred the commission on him through legislation, he reluctantly agreed to go, and so Cato was removed from the centre of Roman politics. Claudius passed several laws benefiting the Triumvirate, known as the Leges Claudii, and became a popular and powerful figure with the people. And following his success in dismissing Cato, he then conspired to exile Cicero by enacting a law which meant exile for anyone who executed a Roman citizen without trial. The Triumvirate wanted rid of Cicero to stop him challenging any of Caesar's achievements from his consulship, and so Claudius had a long-running feud with him, and so this law was obviously enacted with Cicero in mind, because of his involvement in the Catilinarian conspiracy 4 years previously, when he had executed those under suspicion without a trial. When Cicero found that help from his peers was absent, he decided that he would indeed go into exile, and left for Thessalonica on the 23rd of May 58 BC. And once he left, Claudius, who happened to be Cicero's neighbour, had his house confiscated by the Senate, and even arranged to purchase part of the property so he could extend his own home, after which the remainder of Cicero's house was demolished, and Claudius had the land consecrated and a temple built, called the Temple of Liberty, on what remained of the plot. Meanwhile, in Gaul, Caesar continued the subjugation of the Gallic tribes, which not only bolstered Caesar's militaristic reputation, but would help Caesar financially, as he still had large debts at this time. Furthermore, 2 of Caesar's provinces had borders with unconquered territory, and parts of Gaul were known to be unstable at this time, and so, with 4 legions under his command, Caesar extended his now legendary campaigns against the Gallic tribes, which would secure his reputation as one of the greatest military commanders of all time. During the summer of 58 BC, Caesar faced off against the Swiss Celts, including the Helvetii tribe, defeating his enemies with his army's superior weaponry and military training, first at the Battle of Arras, before decisively and swiftly dispatching his opposition at the Battle of Bibracte, where Caesar captured both the son and daughter of one of the wealthy Helvetii aristocrats, Orgetorix, thus securing the area beyond the Alps, in modern-day Saône-et-Loire in France. In the northern region of Europe, north of the River Rhine, Caesar fought against the Suebi, a collective of Germanic tribes, including the Triboci and the Nemetes, amongst others, who sought a future in Gaul, and he defeated them at the Battle of Vosges in eastern France, this being the third major battle of the Gallic Wars. Subsequently, Publius Licinius Crassus, the son of Marcus Licinius Crassus, was hailed for his quick-thinking tactics in battle. And also during this time, Caesar installed the first bridge to cross the Rhine in 10 days, following a pursuit of his enemies north of the river, but returned and dismantled the bridge, allowing his enemies no route to return. The following year, in 57 BC, Caesar fought against the Belgic tribes, first defeating King Galba from the Suasioni tribe at the Battle of Axona, and eventually defeating Boduognatus, leader of the Nervii, despite a near defeat due to the Nervii's forces surprising the Romans at the Battle of Sabis. However, Caesar did defeat them, along with other Belgic tribes in northern France, bringing the region under Roman rulership for the first time. Despite Caesar's victories in the Gallic Wars, at home he would come to face growing friction amongst his allies, as Pompey and Crassus were becoming resentful of Caesar's successes. As well as this, in 57 BC, the Senate had voted to bring Cicero back from exile, at Pompey's behest, despite Clodius voting against the bill, and so Cicero returned and the College of Pontiffs ruled that the consecration of his land had been unlawful, and so he was able to regain his land and rebuild his home on the Palatine in Rome. Meanwhile, at the Lucca Conference of 56 BC, the first triumvirate was renewed, extending Caesar's proconsulship in Gaul for 5 more years. Under the Lex Licinia Pompeia law, Cicero was forced to support the triumvirate, and after the conference, he praised Caesar's military achievements in Gaul, and requested that the Senate arrange a thanksgiving for Caesar's great victories, and allot him funds to pay his troops. After this, Cicero would concentrate mainly on his literary works. By 55 BC, Caesar began expanding Rome's territory into the Germanic region of Europe, and he faced an alliance of the Tencterian Usurpates, who were 2 Celtic tribes who had been removed from their lands by the German Suebi tribe around 60 BC. In order to protect Gaul from the invading tribes from Germania, Caesar approached the tribes at an area identified as Kessel-Lith in the Netherlands by the Rhine River, and it is recorded that Caesar committed atrocities here by attacking the tribes during an armistice, which was met with great negativity from Cato the Younger, as he felt he had committed genocide upon those people, and he attempted to have Caesar handed over to the Germans. Nonetheless, the Tencterian Usurpates were defeated in battle, despite their delaying tactics, including a supposed truce when they attempted to retrieve their cavalry before committing to battle with the Romans, but the approach by Caesar's 5,000-strong cavalry was seen by the Celts as an act of aggression, and with a depleted army, they attacked, eventually pushing the Roman cavalry back, but a second attack by the Tencterian Usurpates was eventually put down, with 74 men dying in the engagement. Caesar was the first general to travel beyond Roman territory and into Germania when he crossed the River Rhine. Whilst there, another of his legions was defeating tribes in the north of Gaul, along the Channel coast, and after this, he retreated from Germania, claiming victory in the region, and so with Gaul conquered and the tribes subjugated, apart from small pockets of resistance, Caesar now had a firm base from which to attack Britain. The prelude to Caesar's invasion of Britain was the claim that the Britons were supporting his enemies in Gaul, justifying an offensive on the island's tribes, and thus Caesar became the first Roman leader to hold an expedition to the then semi-mythical island on the 23rd of August 55 BC. And so, after boarding their 2 legions onto their flotilla, made up of 80 transport ships, as well as warships, Caesar and his legions set sail from Portus Itius, present-day Boulogne, whilst another 18 transports of cavalry set out from Ambleteuse, also in the Pas-de-Calais region of France, the combined forces landing at beaches, probably between Walmer and Pegwell Bay on the coast of Kent. Will the Celtic Britons kneel to the Roman invaders, or will overstretched supply lines, unrest in Gaul, and political developments in Rome cut short Caesar's latest military adventure? Find out in part 2 of the People Profiles Life of Julius Caesar. And until next time, thank you very much for watching.